Welcome to another Zeteo breaking news town hall. I'm Mehdi Hasan, and we are talking about the big story of the day, the Israeli attack on Qatar, on Doha. We woke up this morning to news that the Israelis, and sometimes when you do these stories, you say maybe the Israelis, because the Israelis traditionally didn't take credit, but they are bragging. Benjamin Netanyahu is bragging about the fact that he launched what can only be described as an illegal attack on a sovereign nation to try and take out the entire Hamas negotiating team leadership in Doha, Qatar. Whether it was with US cooperation or not, we're still working it out. There are so many unanswered questions that we thought, let's put together this town hall, invite you, Zeteo subscribers, to come ask your questions to experts who know what they're talking about. I'm joined by Palestinian journalist, analyst Muhammad Shehada, who is from Gaza, but right now in Italy. And he's joining us to talk about what is going on. If you follow him on Twitter, he always has very useful insights. We appreciate, Mohammed, you rejoining us on a Zeteo town hall. And somebody who's not in Italy, but is Palestinian Italian, is Rula Jebreal, who's sitting in front of her best-selling Italian book, Genocidio. You can see it there behind her. Get your copy. Rula is a Zeteo contributor, an author, an academic, an analyst. Thank you both for joining me. I'm just going to jump right in. What was your initial reaction, Mohammed, when you saw that strike this morning? The Israelis have been complaining about Hamas being in Qatar for ages. Did you think they were actually ever going to hit them?
Thanks so much, Mehdi, for having me. Until this afternoon, I thought it was completely unthinkable for Israel to even consider attacking Doha, for the precise reason that it is Netanyahu, it is the Israelis and the Americans that asked Qatar to host Hamas in the first place.
Yep.
You might recall Antony Blinken refused Qatar's request after October 7th to ask Hamas to leave Doha. Hamas was asked to leave Doha in November last year, but the Qatari government, when they announced suspending Hamas's office there and suspending their mediation role because they saw negotiations were going out in completely in nowhere, and Israel was using negotiations basically as cover to buy time for genocide. And Hamas's leaders left the country at the time. I was there when Trump asked Qatar to bring them all back to Doha again. The entire leadership were re-invited to Doha in early December. So basically, Hamas for this whole time were told that operating in Doha, a political office, a mediation office, is coming with a solid guarantee that Israel would never attack you here. This was an American-Israeli guarantee in the first place. And what you see Netanyahu doing is doing three things simultaneously: ensuring the destruction of the annihilation of the largest urban space in the Gaza Strip, Gaza City at the moment, and at the same time attacking any solidarity activists in those flotilla that are trying to prevent the physical destruction, the annihilation of Gaza City, and attacking any diplomatic prospect for saving Gaza City from full annihilation. So he managed to do this outstandingly today, bringing the negotiations to a halt. Qatar announced that it would suspend its role, and there's no incentive for Hamas to be there anymore and engage in those talks when they're just there in a death trap.
Yeah. Mohammed, our friend Ryan Grimm was tweeting earlier today that these leaders of Hamas, and the main target apparently was Khalil al-Hayya, who's become a much more senior figure in Hamas after the killing of Yahya Sinwar, after the killing of Ismail Haniyeh last year. He was the main target of the attack. Apparently, Hamas are saying that all of their leadership were unharmed, were not killed, although Khalil al-Hayya's son was killed. He lost a son previously to an Israeli strike back in 2014. I never understood how killing family members of your opponents is going to make them more likely to come to the table, but that's a conversation for another day. They say that the Hamas leadership are alive and well. This is yet another example of the Israelis trying to kill a negotiating team when they're close to giving a yes. It's almost as if Israel doesn't want a yes, Mohammed.
Yeah, absolutely. There's an Israeli general that said in 2014 verbatim, he said, if we kill their families, that might frighten them. And that's the Israeli strategy that you saw on display when they killed Khalil al-Hayya's family in Gaza during the genocide, as well as Bassem Naim, Ismail Haniyeh, even Ismail Haniyeh's granddaughters and children. It was a victory at the time when Israel assassinated them in a surgical airstrike. But you saw it's a consistent Israeli policy since the start of the genocide. In July 24, right after Haniyeh accepted Biden's ceasefire proposal and prisoner swap proposal that would have seen the release of Israeli hostages, Israel assassinated him immediately in Tehran. He was the chief negotiator for Hamas. The opening strike for Netanyahu when he collapsed the ceasefire in March was on Hamas's entire negotiating team in Gaza itself. So it was at the time Assam Da'alis, the acting prime minister. It was Abu Ubaid al-Jmasi, the head of the emergency committee that's in charge of keeping some level of survival in Gaza. It was Ismail Barhoum, the one that was in charge of financing the emergency committee and government. And it was Salah al-Bardawil, the last standing member of Hamas's political office inside Gaza City. And you're seeing it exactly now at a moment where Hamas has been compromising to great lengths, according to Bshara Bahbah, the American Palestinian negotiator that was talking to Hamas on behalf of Witkoff and the White House. At this precise point, Netanyahu does not want to take any chances that Hamas might say yes to Trump's final
Yeah.
proposal that was announced 2 days ago.
Rula, the US government is not giving comment at the moment. Last time I checked, the deputy White House press secretary, Anna Kelly, was saying no comment from the US administration. The Israelis, however, seem to have a lot of comments. And traditionally, Rula, you know that the Israelis have always done this kind of ambiguity. Maybe we killed that guy. Maybe we didn't. Maybe we dropped that bomb. Maybe it wasn't us. This time round, they are bragging about it. Benjamin Netanyahu has been on Twitter saying Israel initiated it, Israel conducted it, Israel takes full responsibility. The Israeli military are claiming that the IDF conducted a precise strike targeting the senior leadership of the Hamas terrorist organization. Wasn't that precise if they didn't actually kill any of the Hamas leaders? I mean, this is a new Israel that we're seeing, openly, proudly belligerent, not covertly belligerent. Liking this video? Then don't just watch, hit like, share, and subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss a video or live show. But if you want early access to exclusive content, then you have to head to Zeteo.com and subscribe now. You'll be supporting fearless, independent journalism.
I mean, they've been, since this government was elected and took office, they've been clear about their genocidal intent, their ethnic cleansing, agenda. They never hid it, Mahdi. They speak in Hebrew things that nobody translate. And then when you listen to them in Hebrew and when you listen to them in English, these are two different stories. One cater for a Western audience and one cater for the Israeli public. And I think it's very important to understand that the assassination attempt comes after they bombed 8 countries in the last month: Syria, Iran, Lebanon, Tunis. Last night they bombed Tunis. Then they bombed Yemen and they bombed Gaza and they continue bombing left and right. I wasn't surprised.
The West Bank, Syria,
The West Bank, Syria, etc. I wasn't surprised because it's clear with this rogue government, they're not going to stop. They're not trying to influence the Hamas agreed to every term. They've been agreeing for a while, going out of their way, as Muhammad said, to accept every term. Yet Israel was never interested in the negotiation. And I don't believe that Trump didn't in any way know about it. I truly don't believe that I think there's this dance and this relationship, because remember when Soleimani, and I want to just remind everybody, when Soleimani was assassinated in Iraq in the first
Iranian
term,
general,
he was going to negotiate with the Americans. He was told by the Americans, come to Iraq, we're trying to negotiate something. This is a tactic, which is terrorism, that was used by the Americans and by the Israelis. They're partners in crime. And I want to remind everybody that I believe 2 weeks ago, Trump envoy in Lebanon told a Lebanese journalist, Mario Nawaf, and he said, Israel doesn't believe anymore in borders. They will do whatever they want. They will go whatever they want. For them, they don't believe anymore in the established border that were established post-Sykes-Picot. I mean, it is clear that Israel is now acting like a rogue state. It is clear that they are committing terrorism, and we need to call it terrorism, whether the Badger attack in Lebanon, this attack in Lebanon, this attack in Qatar, the attack in Iran, the attack in Yemen. And the main question today, what are Europeans are going to do about it? Because we know that this is a byproduct of the total impunity that Israel was granted for the last 50 plus years.
I mean, rogue state is a good word, because I can't imagine what we would describe any other country in the Middle East that wasn't Israel, that had bombed not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6, 7 countries and areas around the region. It's insane. Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, Iran, as you mentioned, and obviously the West Bank and Gaza, and Tunisia. Last night, the Samud flotilla was hit with a drone strike. It was a ship that our colleague Greta Thunberg was apparently on. She wasn't on at the time, I'm told. But this is the impunity that they have. And going back to the negotiations point that both you and Mohammed have raised, I mean, I interviewed Gershon Baskin, the Israeli negotiator during the Gilad Shalit period, who got the Israeli soldiers, the only Israeli ever to successfully negotiate with Hamas for the release of hostages prior to October 7th. He told me when I interviewed him last year, he reminded me of Ahmed Jabari, Mohammed, in 2012,
Yes.
who was the Hamas commander who was about to sign a permanent truce with Israel. He had been given a truce and he had signed off on it. And they assassinated him then in 2012. And last year, of course, earlier this year, of course, when Israel bombed Iran, they targeted Ali Shamkhani, who was the lead nuclear negotiator, who had just gone on NBC News and said, I'm up for a deal with the United States. We're ready to sign a deal with Trump to do a nuclear deal again. And Israel targeted him, thought they'd killed him, but actually he's still alive. Their targeting isn't so great. But that is their goal, right? To take out people who actually do want to have a negotiation, who do want diplomacy. Mohammed, how dangerous does that make the region right now?
Oh, absolutely. So basically, you saw it. If you just Google the words Haaretz, we could have made peace and then fill the brackets with the name of any Hamas leader, Ahmad Yassin or Ismail Haniyeh or Ahmad Jabari, or now with Khalil Hayya. You would find an article in Haaretz verbatim saying that this was a possibility. You have Ahmad Yassin, who offered Israel about a 10-year truce right after Israel assassinated him. About 2 months later, Khalid Mishal offered Israel 30-year
Yeah.
truce. Israel attempted an assassination on him immediately afterwards. Haniya, we know the fate that followed in Tehran in the assassination there. And you saw it, as you mentioned, with Ahmad Jabari that pushed Haaretz to label the article with the headline, "We killed our subcontractor in Gaza," because he was advancing a permanent ceasefire that would have ensured Israel's security. Israel always sees this as what Avner Yaniv, the Israeli military analyst, referred to in his book Dilemmas of Security as peace offensives. When Palestinians become too moderate, they rise to international respectability, that Israel runs out of excuses to maintain a form of
Yeah.
apartheid or an illegal occupation. So that's what you're seeing right now. But the danger of it is that every other country around the world is watching. And the
Yes.
message that Israel is sending, if you don't arm yourself to the teeth and stand for yourself and bully
So
Israel and other countries in return, you wouldn't get so far. And you saw the same behavior from apartheid South Africa, because it attacked at the time Angola, it attacked Namibia, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Botswana. They attacked like virtually every single country around them. And you're seeing the same rogue state behavior from Israel today.
So you mentioned what should other countries be thinking, doing, watching. We've got a lot of questions in the chat. Please do ask your questions in the Q&A. We got more than a couple of hundred of you watching this live right now. Please do stick your question. We'll try and get through as many as we can. Can't ask them all, but let's try and ask some to our expert guests. Vichy Betapudi asks Rula, what do we think the Gulf states are thinking now? Hard to imagine this isn't a turning point for them.
It should be a turning point for them. Israel is trashing, the most rudimentary norms of international law, any norm. And I think the Gulf state that tried to appease Trump administration, I mean, for God's sake, the Qataris give him, a plane. The biggest military base
do they
in
get do they get a reef? Do they get the plane back, or how does it work? Is there a return on that?
I mean, the biggest when nobody wanted Americans in the regions, they opened the door and they had a biggest military base in the region for Americans with 100,000 basically soldiers there. Nobody in the region, especially after the invasions, the first Iraq, nobody in the region wanted that. But the one thing that I think it needs to be clear, not only for the GCC, the Qataris, the Gulf, etc., you cannot appease Israel. You cannot negotiate with them. You cannot appease the Americans. You cannot even pour billions of dollars and think you're safe, not even if you buy weapons with them. And I just want to point out, unlike many others, the Gulf state understand the impact of these kind of policies. They remember the Iraq war and the Iraq invasion. They also remember President Obama, who said ISIS is a direct outgrowth of Al-Qaeda in Iraq that grew out of our invasion, which is the American invasion. That's why you need to think before you shoot. Not only that, they even, ISIS was much worse and much more radical, much more extremist than Al-Qaeda will ever be. Hamas is a moderate, and it's never been an international organization. It was always national, always connected with its aim to the military occupation of Israel. I don't know, to be honest.
Rula, just to clarify, when you say moderate, you mean, some of the stuff they've done is not moderate. Let's be clear.
What I mean,
you mean relatively, it's not a Salafi jihadist group in the same way as ISIS, Boko Haram, Al-Qaeda, which is what the Israelis have always wanted everyone to believe. Their goals are more local, they are more national, they are interested in the Palestine issue.
Yes.
They're not interested in a global caliphate.
I am comparing them to ISIS.
Yeah.
I'm comparing them to other jihadist groups. Hamas was never interested in international jihad or transnational jihad, whatever we want to call it.
Yes.
But Israel is interested in that. Israel is
Yes.
now radicalizing and use its policy, its
100%.
genocidal policy in Gaza is creating so much desperation, so much hopelessness, so much hate. And I don't know, we will have terrorist attack. That's for sure. It's the question of when.
Well, there was
But
one,
then
unfortunately,
Israelis will
tragically,
say,
this week in Jerusalem. There was an attack this week in
exactly.
Jerusalem, which is
But this is
predicted
only the
and predictable,
beginning,
as tragic as it is.
because they're radicalizing an entire generation. But then they'll turn around and say, you see, it's not us. It's not our policy producing this. This is a clash of civilization. This is us versus them. This is a civilization of evil and death. And nobody will remember, because mainstream media is not addressing the fact that Israel genocidal policy is creating extremism and is
100%.
creating terrorism. And if we think that any terrorist is a legitimate military target, then Ben Gvir is a legitimate military target because he's a convicted terrorist. He's an Israeli. This logic goes nowhere. We need to
it's a very dangerous, it's a very dangerous road for the Israelis to go down. The precedents that they've set over the last 2 years, I think they're going to haunt us for decades to come. And I think the Israelis will haunt Israel in many ways. Cassie Ahmed asks, Mohammed, is it true that Qatar knew about the attack prior to it happening? What reason would they have to allow this? I mean, we were told at the time when the Iranians, of course, rained rockets down upon Doha earlier this year, that was all done in coordination with the Americans and with the Qataris. The base was emptied. No one was hurt. Could that be the case again this time, do you think?
Well, I think if Qatar, the idea that Qatar would have any sort of foreknowledge about an Israeli attack on it is completely moronic, because Qatar's entire brand is that it is an area that would never be bombed. It's an area that would never be attacked by Israel. That's an absolute red line, because Qatar is a key US ally. And basically, the entire Qatari brand is around mediation. It's even written in their constitution. So it would be a suicide, a political suicide for their image internationally, for anyone to try to visit Qatar from now on and expect that they would survive. They would be walking into a death trap. So I don't think they had any knowledge about it. But the US had for sure. It's a question about how much time was the US given before the attack to deliberate whether it's a good idea or not. We know from experience that when Israel assassinated Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, they informed the US right before the attack. Yoav Gallant, he admitted later on, the Israeli defense minister, that he told his American counterpart right before the attack, in order to prevent any room for the US to thwart or undermine this assault on Tehran or another country unprovoked. And you're seeing the same scenario here.
It's just fascinating and weird and depressing for Qataris, I'm sure. They're the only country, I think, in the world to have ever been bombed by both Iran and Israel in the same year. Bizarre. I guess that's what happens when you are negotiating in the middle of things. Mohammed, one follow-up, though, and I want to bring in an audience question. Rula mentioned Saudi Arabia and the UAE and the other Gulf countries and what lessons they take. There are some people arguing that this couldn't have happened without the UAE and Saudi sign-off. They've always had it in for Qatar. Do you buy that? I mean, there was a famous blockade. They had a big falling out. Then they all reconciled. Do you think the Emiratis or the Saudis may have had a heads up about this? Or are they furious today?
Well, there are still some rivalries and disagreements and tensions between Qatar and the Emirates in particular, and between Qatar and Bahrain, less so with Saudi Arabia. There's been a process of reestablishing relations to a solid level. But the idea that a GCC member country would allow an attack on a single GCC member country undermines the whole GCC idea, the Gulf Cooperation Council, because the Emirates, as well as Saudi Arabia and Bahrain and Qatar, they're all doing the exact same thing. They're all hubs for regional and international diplomacy, mediation, etc. So if one of them is attacked and that taboo, that red line is gone, that means every single one of them is prone to attacks as well.
Good point. Rula, Mira Al-Rabi, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, says, if for nothing else, shouldn't this latest terrorist attack warrant the end of the Abraham Accords?
Absolutely. I mean, the genocide in Gaza was supposed to be the end of it. Remember the whole promise that they are going to do the Abraham Accord, normalize a relationship with Israel in order for Israel not to annex the West Bank. That never happened. That promise really never materialized. Actually, it emboldened Israel to annex more land, to steal more land, to kick out more Palestinians. Before October 7, nobody remember, but way before October 7, ministers, cabinet minister, Israeli cabinet ministers were bragging openly about annexing territories, were bragging openly about kicking out Palestinians, not only from Gaza, but from the West Bank, from East Jerusalem, where my family lives. I mean, we saw the marches everywhere, the Israeli marches before October 7, where the public together with some ministers and some MK, members of the Knesset, talking clearly about ethnic cleansing of Palestinians and calling for a second Nakba. That was before October 7. The agenda never changed. It's Jewish supremacy, is greater Israel, is ethnic cleansing, and is genocide.
Mohammed, a couple of questions, linked questions from subscribers in the chat. Ahmed Hamdi says, will the Hamas negotiation team leaders now remain in Qatar? If not, what are their alternatives? Do they go to Iran? Do they go to Turkey? Do they stay in Doha, which is obviously not safe now for them? And Furqan Amjad asks, what happens to US troops stationed in Qatar? Are they there? Are they there for the long run? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. So now, number one, with the second question, that's a very important one. The US just sent a message to its key allies all around the world that nothing is going to protect you, no matter how much US weaponry you buy, or how much you invest in US territory or US industries, or how much American troops you put on your ground. None of it will shield you from Israel. Israel is above and beyond anything, and it's bound by nothing. The second question about Hamas, you're basically you saw American diplomats in Doha that would go there and walk on the street without any protection, without anyone around them. Like John Bolton, at some point, there was a picture of him on a street in Doha walking around. And in the first Trump administration, at the time when Qatar was under Emirati, Saudi siege and boycott. So that brand is now being shattered by Israel. Which means it's basically like an existential threat to what the country stands for, what the entire GCC stands for. The last time there was a similar debacle was when Israel assassinated a major Hamas leader, Mahmoud al-Mabhouh, in the Emirates in 2010.
Yeah.
And it became such a deep crisis between Abu Dhabi and Tel Aviv. It took an entire decade to solve it again with the Abraham Accords. Back then, the Emiratis managed to immediately identify the Israeli cell immediately and publicized it all over the media to scandalize what happened there. It was an absolute red line. As for Hamas, they have many other options. Qatar was the area that the US and Israel asked them to be at, and asked Qatar to host them as an area where they can be reached and where they can reach the Israelis and the Americans through mediators and de-escalate or reach to an agreement or end wars or military assaults, Israeli military assaults on Gaza. But now what's the incentive to be there anymore? They have many other options. They have Turkey, they have Iran, they have North Korea, they have like
Russia.
they have Iraq, Russia, China. It's all over. And it's basically Israel is driving those Hamas leaders away from where Israel should have them. Israel should have them in a place where they can talk to them when things get too far, when there's a time for a solution. But now they're going to disappear off the radar.
It's
Can
so
I add
interesting.
something, Mehdi?
Yeah, please.
There's a big scandal in Italy where Muhammad is because the Italian government, the Meloni neo-fascist government, is hosting 100 Israeli soldiers in Italy, two resorts actually in Italy, and they're protecting them. They have them walking around with the police protection. Nobody wants to see them. Nobody wants to serve them in restaurants. They stopped talking in Hebrew. This is the report coming out because they're terrified. They're scared. In a resort where they came out of Gaza, most of them, they talked about, oh, we want, to decompress from the genocide. They didn't use the word genocide, decompress after the Gaza war. But what's happening in European nations is fascinating, but also alarming. The level of hatred that people have, average European citizens, they have for Israeli soldiers. People don't talk in Hebrew anymore because they're terrified. Israel is putting at risk the life of Israelis and Jews alike. By their policies, it's putting a target on everybody that is traveling around the world.
They are. And Mohammed, just to go back to something you mentioned a moment ago, you said, this is a message to America's allies. No matter how many bases you host, no matter how many weapons you buy, nothing can protect you from an Israeli attack with American green light. And I'm just reminded of how much money and resources the Qataris put into cozying up, not just to the US government, but to Trump specifically. In the first term, just to remind people watching, in Trump's first term, there was a blockade of Qatar, and the Emiratis and the Saudis persuaded the US via Jared Kushner to take their side against Qatar. Trump called Qatar, I think, a terrorist country. He made all sorts of threats. Now, this time round, he hosted the Emir of Qatar at the White House. He called him a great friend, an incredible gentleman. He hosted him at Mar-a-Lago last year. The Qataris spent millions of dollars on lobbyists in Washington, D.C., on Republicans trying to get close to this administration. And yet, all for naught. At the end of the day, you can get bombed by Israel no matter how many troops you host, no matter how many weapons you buy. Eric Trump was just in Doha a few weeks ago, signing off on a Trump golf course in Qatar. Don't know how that's going to work out long term. So it is a very important point. And actually, one of our subscribers makes the point about that you made, Rula, and I want to follow up with you. By striking Yunus Saber, I think the name is, says, by striking Hamas leaders in Doha, Israel hasn't just targeted an enemy, it may have destabilized relations with Qatar and Turkey. Are we witnessing the early signs of a regional realignment where US allies in the Gulf start hedging towards Iran, Russia, China, because they no longer trust Washington to restrain Israel? We've already seen India's Modi falling out with Trump and heading straight into the arms of Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin.
If I may, yes, of course. I mean, who would not think rationally that after everything you've done to the Americans and for the Israelis, just a reminder, before October 7, a week before October 7, Yossi Cohen, the head of the Mossad, was in Qatar begging the Qataris to continue to finance Hamas. Hamas was always financed by the Qatari because the Americans and the Israelis asked them. They were begging them for a year to do that. As we speak now, Israel is financing Al-Qaeda and arming Al-Qaeda inside Gaza in order to steal basically the aid and kill as many Palestinians. They're using them, they're arming them. These are the facts. So if I am sitting in Doha today, I'll be thinking, you know what, at least, whatever we think of, countries, Russia and China, they never abandoned their allies. They never betrayed them. Look at Assad. Assad committed all kinds of things, but when it was, the moment where Assad was about to be killed, the Russian took him out. They will always stand with their. So the message is very clear. America will betray you and will allow their allies to bomb you, whether Russia and China will protect you to the end.
Yeah, Donald Trump is doing a great job of doing global and regional alignments from Asia to the Middle East to Europe. It's interesting, by the way, Mohammed, I mean, you must have followed this last year. When the US election, there were so many people who were convinced that Donald Trump would somehow be better on Palestine. He would pick a fight with Netanyahu. He didn't like Benjamin Netanyahu, apparently, and he would be more transactional with the Gulf Arabs and with Erdogan.
Yeah.
None of that has worked out, has it, Mohammed? Right now, he is once again the most pro-Israeli president of our lifetimes.
Yeah, absolutely. At the time I wrote about it, I said that Harris might be a terrible candidate for so many reasons. Part of Genocide Joe's administration offering more of the same, but they're still operating within norms, decorum. They're predictable. We know exactly what's going to come out of this. Whereas for Trump, it's basically a throw of the dice, and the dice is very much biased and is flipped on a biased territory. He's surrounding himself with pro-Israeli fanatics from head to toe, Mike Huckabee, Miriam Edelson, etc. And it's the lunatic kind of fanatics. It's not the people supporting Israel out of some sort of transactional interest. It's the people that have it deep within them to see the end of times being hurried up and expedited. And he always listens to the last person in the room. So no matter how many people said that Trump might be transactional, unlike Biden, it was very obvious. The last people in the room will always be the Israelis and the pro-Israelis. There was one time when Trump visited Palestine the first time in 2018, he sat down with Mahmoud Abbas, our president, unfortunately, and he basically told him, they told me that you're a terrorist, but you're a very nice guy, because Abbas offered everything immediately. He compromised on all files. He said, I want a disarmed, demilitarized state with no right of return, with blah, 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 and with maintaining the largest Israeli settlements. Most settlers will stay in the West Bank, land swaps in return. I want NATO to be on the borders between Palestine and Jordan and between Palestine and Israel. American troops will be deployed there. Hamas would no longer exist. So Trump said, okay, I think we have a deal. And Abbas looks to his right and to his left and he tells his team, I think we solved the conflict. The occupation is over. And Trump even jokingly says, when you get to the land swaps part of the negotiations, call me because I worked in real estate my entire life. I know how to pick up a good piece of land. I'm going to give you tips and advices. And as soon as Trump walks out of the room, Jared Kushner runs back and pulls Saib Baraiqat, the chief negotiator at the time that you interviewed many times. And he basically tells him this. He says, forget everything POTUS just told you. You deal with me. You're not dealing with him anymore. And that's the end of it. That's the last time.
And
And
we know how close Jared Kushner and Netanyahu. I always like to remind people when Jared Kushner was a kid, Benjamin Netanyahu used to stay in his family home with his dad. He used to sleep in Jared's bed, not with Jared in it. Jared slept in the basement, but they would share. They would stay together. That's how close he was, family friend. So never forget that link between the Netanyahus and the Trumps. Rula, Christina Drondro says there have been discussions around the idea of moving the upcoming UN General Assembly UNGA to Geneva so the Palestinian representatives can participate. To go back to what Muhammad just said, breaking norms, the United States has now prevented the Palestinian delegation from attending UNGA, which goes against everything that they agreed to when they hosted the UN in New York. They're not allowed to ban foreign delegations unless there's a national security threat. Mahmoud Abbas is not a national security threat. So Christina's asking, given the calls for a protective force to be immediately deployed under the UN Charter, if nothing else, this latest series of terrorist attacks by Israel should amplify the need for this move of UNGA. Do you think pressure from the people, as well as independent news orgs such as Zeteo, would help achieve this goal? I mean, do you think there's any prospect of that happening at such short notice? I don't see it, but it's worth calling for.
I don't see it, but it should happen. And it should have happened a while ago because the US is using its veto power to thwart any diplomatic solution. They vetoed the establishment of Palestinian state. They vetoed any ceasefire, etc. It should happen. And I don't want to absolve Democrats from their responsibility. We're in this moment also because of Democrat. 29% of the Americans didn't vote because of Biden-Harris support for
Agreed.
this unconditional mass slaughter, this genocide. And I just want to go further. This is a message for every ally, including the Europeans, that just told Trump in multiple ways that they will dedicate 5% of their budget to rearming themselves, buying weapons from the United States. Gulf has been buying weapons. They've been spending billions of dollars, and this will not save you. The only thing that will save you is actually trying to protect these international institutions, international norms. And it's so disappointing, Mehdi, because the Trump administration has been sanctioning the ICC prosecutors, the UN envoys and UN rapporteurs, Francesca Albanese and many others, and they even sanctions last week 3 human rights organizations, Palestinian ones, Al-Haq and many others, because they were collecting war crime evidence against Israel. So they are weaponizing the law and they're trashing the law. Why would anybody reward them by coming to? I mean, if I was any country, whether Venezuela or Colombia or any country that is in opposition ideologically and politically to the United States, I'd be terrified to come to New York this September.
Yes, and I would be terrified about attending the World Cup or the Olympics in the US next year too, on a side note.
Absolutely.
Mohammed Zaid Al-Waisi says, is there any threat of Qatar retaliating against Israel? The Israelis always tell us Qataris are state sponsors of terrorism. They always claim Qatar is this tentacles everywhere. So are they worried about a Qatari response?
Qatar is the host of the largest American base in the Middle East, the largest American military base, Al Udeid. And basically, the message that Israel is sending to them, that I'm reading now from people in Qatar, in other Gulf countries, is we are paying billions and billions to the US to protect us. And Trump uses those billions to manufacture bombs that he then supplies to Israel to bomb us with the bombs that were developed with our very own money. And the message that this sends is an Arabic saying. It says, "Ukiltu yawma ukila thawr al-abyad." I was eaten the day the white buffalo was eaten or the white bull was eaten. And it means if you let it happen to your brother, it'll happen to you eventually. And Arab countries, until now, they managed to calm their publics by saying, if we engage against Israel, the destruction that unfolded in Gaza will be our fate as well. Or if we react against Israel, we will lose a lot dearly.
Mohammed,
But now you're having Israel bombing them anyways.
Mohammed, on that note, Ola Nasser asks in the chat, what about Egypt? What does everyone think about Egypt? That's one country we haven't mentioned so far. What is the Egyptians thinking watching this?
Well, very good question. And thanks again for where we worked together and writing an article exactly about that I published on Zeteo for Mehdi. And it was precisely on this really talking point of blaming Egypt for everything that unfolds in Gaza. Can Egypt do more? Absolutely. There's a lot that they can do. And Egyptian diplomats and former diplomats, they are very honest about this every time we talk to them behind the scenes and even in front of cameras. But are they to blame for what's unfolding in Gaza? Absolutely not. It's Israel's sole responsibility, and it's in Israel's best interest to deflect blame by blaming other Arab countries or the
Yeah.
international community, etc. And you're seeing it in the example of Israel preventing any demonstration against the genocide in Gaza. Like literally, a member of Knesset, Sami Abu Shahada, a former member, he told me that he tried to organize a protest against the genocide, and the police for many months they kept going after them, canceling venues, threatening. And when they did it, less than 50 people, the police came and rounded all of them up and interrogated them for hours and held them for hours. But at the same time, Israel allowed a demonstration in front of the Egyptian embassy in Tel Aviv against the
Yes.
blockade on Gaza. It's absolutely lunatic.
It is, well, it's very rational from the Israeli perspective. Let us wrap up. We're almost out of time. I want to give the last question to, actually, before I give the last, I've got one question of my own. Rula, Turkey. We're hearing a lot about the Turks looking at what's happening with Israel's bombing of all the countries that you listed, Syria, Yemen, Iran, all the countries, Lebanon, over the last year, West Bank, Gaza, Tunisia, now Qatar. The Turks must be thinking, at some point, they're coming for us. They say about us what they say about Qatar. They say we're Muslim Brotherhood. They say we sponsor Hamas. They say we're anti-Semitic. At some point, Erdogan, who's already close to the Russians, already close to a lot of people the West don't like, at what point does the Turks say, maybe we need a nuclear weapon? Maybe we need better security. Maybe we can't rely on NATO or the US?
I think they already are making these assessments a while back. I think the whole idea that they're not thinking this way, I mean, it was clear that Israel's intention was clear immediately after October 7, but also Americans' inaction and unconditional support to Israel is now driving all these countries to say the only thing that can save us a nuclear weapon. If I am in Iran, or Iran didn't need to be hit to start thinking this way. After they killed their the chief negotiator, the only option for them to survive at this point is having a nuclear weapon. Look at North Korea. The only way they're surviving because they have nuclear weapon. Pakistan, other countries.
Yeah.
The Saudis themselves have been, talking about,
Yeah.
the whole approach of the Abraham Accord has failed. Any approach to appease these people will continue to fail. The only way is united, stay united and arm yourself and create a bridge with the global South. The only one that are standing up to Israel in this moment, legally, politically, and other ways, is the global South. I must add Spain. Yesterday, the Spanish government put 9 sanctions against Israel. Luckily, we have somebody in Europe. For the rest of Europe, it's a disaster.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you mentioned Spain and Global South, because telling the Middle East to stay united, good luck with that, Rula. Last question, I'm gonna give the last word to Bisho, who's one of our subscribers, who asked the first question in the chat at 1:04, been waiting patiently for 36 minutes. I'll give Bisho the last word. What is the end game here, Bisho asks. What likely scenarios do you see playing out in the next 3 to 5 years? Bisho, I'm not going to ask a question about 3 to 5 years. No one knows what's happening in the next 3 to 5 years. But let me rephrase Bisho's question if they don't mind. Next 3 to 5 months at least, guys, what do you think is going to happen?
Well, the largest division now in the Israeli government and military is between two teams. Team one thinks that the genocide in Gaza is complete. All you have to do is end the war, get the hostages out, and then if you need, you can continue to bomb it like they did in Lebanon and close the place, prevent reconstruction, and people would leave. And team two is Netanyahu, who's saying, no, we need to continue the war until every home in Gaza is reduced to the rubble, until the very last building there. Aerial bombardment is not enough to annihilate a city, which is precisely why Israel is now moving with bulldozers, with tanks, with vehicles on the ground to go in Gaza City and knock every building there down like they did in Rafah, Jabalia, Beit Hanun, Beit Lahia, Khan Yunis. And that's precisely what they're going to do for the next 3 to 4 months. It might be also what they're going to do for the next 1 to 2 years. And at the same time, you're seeing an undying insurgency in Gaza, that you're still seeing autonomous Hamas cells ambushing the IDF from time to time and killing Israeli soldiers in different areas in Gaza, including in areas that Israel had invaded multiple times and had claimed to have, quote, cleared of any Hamas militants multiple times. So the answer is Netanyahu's interest is to there's always the hypothetical that Netanyahu wants an endless war or Netanyahu is afraid of Smotrich Ben-Gvir. I think if Netanyahu signs a deal tomorrow, the most that Smotrich Ben-Gvir would do is resign from government but not collapse the coalition. They did it exactly the same with Ben-Gvir last time there was a ceasefire. The Israeli ultra-Orthodox parties, they did it when Netanyahu refused to pass a law to exempt him from military service. They resigned from government but did not collapse the coalition. So what Netanyahu wants is more time to finish the job. That's it. The job will be finished when every home in Gaza is reduced to rubble.
Rula, last word.
And when Palestinians will be in concentration camps, and then they will start implementing the Gaza formula, exactly like Smotrich said yesterday. He tweeted that saying, we want to do what we did in the Palestinian villages in the West Bank, occupied West Bank. We want to make it resemble Rafah, where they destroyed completely. If I must, take this on a global level, we see the militarization in American cities. When the President of the United States invokes the use of the military against democratic cities, Chicago, Los Angeles, California, etc. We told the world as Palestinians that this is not going to be only about the Palestinians. When you trash all the rules, all the norms, all the conventions, in the end, this is not going to be affecting only Palestinians or Middle Easterners or brown people or Muslims. It's coming back home. And Trump is trying to implement that kind of madness in the American streets. And more than ever, we need to understand that this is fascism. This is the white supremacist idea. I mean, when Trump tweeted about, I believe, Chicago, and he put that hat on himself, saying, war is coming to Chicago or something on it. I look at the hat, and the symbol of the hat is actually, the symbol of the people who were hunting down slaves during the era of slavery and bring them back and probably putting them in chains. This is bondage. What Israel idea for Arabs and Muslims and Palestinians, that 400 people that live in the Middle East, is you will live, we will crush you under our boots. If you dare to stand up, we will bomb you to oblivion. And I think America support that kind of militaristic vision. But this militaristic vision is something that Trump relish. He loved this, the whole idea that he is the lead, the war chief, that, he turned that own name instead of Ministry of Defense, Ministry of War. The war is coming back to America, and it's not only going to be radicalization, it's going to be your own government spying on you and crushing you.
I think using Israeli surveillance. I think the phrase that's used is imperial boomerang. And that's what we're witnessing. Rula, Muhammad, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you. There's over 240 people in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us at short notice for this breaking news town hall. Sorry we could only take around a dozen of your questions, but they were great questions. Great guests. Rula Jebreal is a Zeteo contributor. Muhammad Shehada has written for Zeteo on multiple occasions, friend of our media company. Thank you both for joining us and giving us your fantastic analysis on this dark day for international law and the international order, so-called. And for everyone watching at home, thank you for being paid subscribers to Zeteo, supporting us as we grow and expand. Please do tell your friends, your family, your colleagues to sign up, become paid members to Zeteo so we can expand and build independent journalism, especially on days like this. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. Did you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn on notifications. For exclusive content and to support our independent, unfiltered journalism, head over to Zeteo.com. Your support matters.